Very good afternoon to the audience, and I must say thank you for your commitment and thank you for your time to be here today with us. I also welcome my panelists, and let's dive straight in. We heard the previous speaker talk about energy independence, India's ambition on energy transition and decarbonization. So, Bimal, let's start with you. We love to understand, first of all, what Welspun New Energy is all about. It's its second innings. But green hydrogen and in the renewable space. Now, Climate Scorecard, that's an independent think tank, has come out with some statistics that India's fossil fuel subsidies have dived down, that means they've declined, by about 72%, whereas they're still 9 times higher than the subsidies we get for renewable energy. Now, given the fact that we still are very heavily reliant on thermal power generation and the fossil fuel space, what are your thoughts? I mean, for a for-profit entity in the renewable sector, what kind of operating future do you see in the renewable sector in your second innings?
Thanks, Chandni. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, BW Business World, for inviting me for this session to share, our thoughts and views. I think the earlier speakers covered, pretty substantial on the Make in India and independence, energy independence part. If we look into, I will not talk fossil fuels because we're talking sustainability. I will focus more on the renewable side. Anything which you want to start new, you need to give a support. Even if we take, our lives, when the infant comes into the, I will say, life and he want to start, he cannot start walking or running. So he needs some support to crawl, to walk and to run. I think, we should look from that perspective, the renewal is happening. If I look into India has done solar around 70 plus gigawatt, 72 gigawatt plus number. If you look into the viability gap funding or any other stuff, it was given until some number below than 15 gigawatt. It was something between 10 to 15 gigawatt if I look into. Even less than that, yeah. So the 55 gigawatt is happening much more competitive than fossil fuels. And we're talking 500 gigawatt, we may talk 5,000 gigawatt, every benefit is going to come to the country, to the citizens and everyone, right? So this is the baby steps which we are taking to incentivize or give the benefit, right? So this is my thought, when you say that subsidies are still high or still happening, it need to be there for the initial phase. Now you mentioned, so Welspun definitely has built a pretty big portfolio in the past. And we sold it. Now we call it Welspun 2.0. We are again trying to enter into a market focusing on green hydrogen, focusing on renewables. And we are watching the market. We are still shaping up our, next plans. But yeah, so now you are saying how the profits will come because the subsidies are coming. Now, when we talk about the subsidies, it is a very, very, I will say, generic subject. We need to see that subsidies are happening in which shape, which form, and to whom. If I look into the renewable subsidies, the massive subsidies are happening to the rooftops or the captive or residential customers, not to the industrial customers, right? And they're the major chunk of the consumers, or I will say the powerhouses who will using the power at the much bigger numbers. Now, when we call profitability, it has a again very general term. So it's like, someone can be happy with, one chapati or one bread and another one wants 4 breads, right? So again, I think in the given circumstances, if we compare fossil fuels, if you look into the grid tariffs, they are varying between, 8 rupees to 12 rupees depending upon the area, location and the way you want to use. But if you can go to the renewables, every industry is trying to while working on sustainable environment, they're trying to save money and they're trying to bring their bottom line also up. It was definitely previously, if we look into, it was always focused more on the sustainable part. Now, the sustainability is giving us, profitability also. That the challenge with renewable is 24/7 availability of the power. The RTC power is one of the big challenge which people are trying to work on. If we look into solar standalone, we are talking 30% sort of CUF plus minus. If we talk about wind, we are talking about 35 to 45% depending on the locations. If we combine hybrid, we are talking about 60 to 75% number, depending on the location. Now, after that, the storage solutions are still not competitive. That's one of the massive challenge. And that's where people are trying to focus on hydrogen. Now, hydrogen, again, can help to bring that net zero part. The reason, hydrogen is a very diversified molecule. It can use as a feedstock. It can use as a fuel. It can use as a storage. So if I look into practically today, this seems the best molecule. Tomorrow we may have something new coming up, right? So we don't know. The hydrogen was there since ages. I think the commercial things were not working out, but the way people are focusing, the way I look into the journey is from $5, you can say $4 to $6, the people put the number, to going to $1.5 to $2. But if you look into the solar, we talk about 18 rupees becoming 2 rupees, 2.5 rupees now. So the journey was 10x. Now here we are talking only 50% journey. So in nutshell, I think that the things are going in the right direction. And India don't have the fossil fuels. I've heard the previous panelists saying that energy independence. The energy independence will come from the renewable sources for India. We have abundance of wasteland. We have a good solar irrigation. We have a good wind resources. Yes, the high wind sites are gone, and then we have a plenty of water. We are a coastal country on 3 sides, so we have everything for hydrogen, solar, wind. And we can use pumped storage also. So that's my view that, it is going to be competitive and definitely it's making sense. That's why many of the corporates are going in the CIN segment. Thank you.
Very well articulated. Thank you, Bimal. Moving ahead, Nxtra. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Nxtra Data Limited is a subsidiary of Bharti Airtel, and I think last month you came out with your inaugural sustainability report for financial year 2023. Now, I love the tag. It's responsible by choice and sustainable by design. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my next question to you, Sindhu, is that Nxtra has achieved 58% increase in renewable energy. Phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you have aimed to become a net zero company, a net zero emissions by 2031.
Absolutely.
That's a wonderful target. Now, as a buyer on this panel, I would love to understand what motivated you to this shift to renewable energy. Was it the cost of capital? Was it the policy initiative? Or was it an investor pressure? And if I may also mention the second question I have for you, it's what are the success factors behind achieving energy transition? I mean, in your experience in this last 1 year. Over to you.
Sure, thank you. Wow. So let me give you the background first. So Nxtra, the data center arm for Bharti Airtel, so that you will get an idea the quantum which we are discussing here. We are consuming around 200 megawatt round-the-clock power, and we are aiming around 600 megawatt in next 3 to 4 years. And that, with considering all this, we are saying that we will be net zero by 2030. So considering all those things and aiming net zero by 2030 is a tough call. But we have publicly announced that, first thing. Second, with respect to renewable energy consumption and all that, we have started this journey a few years back. I would say 4 or 5 years back when we signed the first corporate power purchase agreement. And thereafter, we have collaborated with more than, I would say, 7 or 8 companies. We have formed more than 11 to 12 SPVs. And we have signed long-term contracts. So we are not just saying that, okay, I need power for 2 years, I need commitment for 15, 20 years. So this is how we have started. Another point which I really want to make, that we have an RTC load, round-the-clock load. And to meet that round-the-clock consumption, we need all sort of sources. We need power from solar, we need wind, and we need storage also, although there is no such progress in the storage piece. And the pump storage, which we see that which will come in next few years. Considering all that and the interstate option which we have now, so our target is to have maximum actual replacement. So we are not relying on the offset. So what we are targeting, let's have maximum replacement first. Let us target 80, 85% or 90%, which is permissible as per the state policies or the central policy which we have. And thereafter, when we are done with all this, we'll target the offsets. So this is the, I would say, the journey which we have started. Second question with respect to why we are doing this and what, who is forcing us to do this. So we are a part of Bharti Airtel Group. We started this journey around 10 years back. We started investing in small projects. But Nxtra being an B2B arm, we also have an external investor onboarded a few years back. Definitely, we are getting a push from the investor, but at the same time, it's our responsibility when we have investors like Carlyle and other global investors to meet their expectations. Second, we are also serving to all major, I would say, hyperscale clients, IT, ITS, and BFSI clients. They have their own target. So it's a chain. If you will not fulfill your piece, they will not be able to achieve their target. So it's a chain. So we are helping them out to reach their target, as well as we are adopting our targets to reach our ambition. So that's the whole story. It's not just investor clients, it's the holistic approach. And it's in our culture also. If you'll see the tagline, which we have narrated, so it's a very well thought articulation. So we are actually responsible and we are sustainably doing this.
Would you still want to give a go at, what kind of inspiration you might have for other buyers as something that gives comfort to the renewable sector space, that this is something that is here to stay and this transition is truly possible?
So let me give you the background. So if you'll see, the whole landscape has been changed a lot. 5 years back, we were not having the policies in place. Now we are saying we have green open access, allowing 100 kilowatt consumers also. We have interstate supply also. So now, if after all those policy interventions, if we will not do and if we will not purchase RE, then it's our fault, I would say. Earlier, we were having, constraint with respect to the adoption of these policies by various states. Now, if you will see, more or less all states are adopting. They are encouraging, and on ground, people are purchasing the RE power. So I would say it's really, it's not just that we'll wait for another few years to have more lucrative policies. I say this is the right time we should invest and we should buy RE.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sindhu. Moving on, Kartikeya. COP28 is around the corner, and I'm really looking forward to being there next week in Dubai, and I'm hoping some of my panelists will also be there. Now, the IEA has last week talked about the 3-point agenda on COP28. And this is really pushing the envelope now. It's talking about tripling renewable energy, and that is to a capacity of 11,000 gigawatts by 2030. It's talking about doubling energy efficiency. Now, that's, from now to doubling it to 2030. And the most important of it all, phasing out fossil fuels. And yes, G20 was a little disappointing on that count, but that agenda is back on the table, and the COP28 wants to accelerate the phasing out process and getting at least the financial sector not providing funds towards new fossil fuel companies and sector entities. Now, while India has targeted about 50% installed power capacity in the renewable sector, non-fossil fuel sources by 2030, thermal power continues to remain mainstream. And yes, we all know, we don't, like Bimal was saying, elephant is born and it has to take baby steps and then it matures to running. We understand that, but I think the risks outweigh the opportunities far wide enough so that we accelerate. We do everything in our power to move in that space. My question to you, Kartikeya, is that what are the 3 things India needs to prioritize to triple its energy capacity and genuinely phase out fossil fuels?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. And it's a great question, and I think I'll get an opportunity to, and I have the last mover advantage in this panel. I've already heard Bimal and Sindhu speak, and some very pertinent points have been put forward, I think, by both Bimal and Sindhu. And to your question, I think the 3-point agenda sounds amazing. And I'm sure that it would do all of us a world of good, literally, if the world leaders can get behind these 3 things seriously, which has been, a little bit of a problem in the past. And I hope that at some day we can get around that. But I think as business leaders, a lot of power rests in our hands, right? Just like Sindhu also said that, if you get the opportunity, and I've seen that even in the last panel that was being discussed, right? If you've got an opportunity, you've got the means, if you're not acting on that right thing, then it is really not a great thing to be doing as a leader. And I think as consumers, as business leaders, we do have power. Even if the world leaders don't really go out and create the right kind of environment for these 3 things to be achieved, I think as individuals and as companies, organizations, if we can swear that, all right, this is the general direction in which we have to lead ourselves, our families, our companies, our communities, then I think we can definitely get there. It's a noble pursuit. What I feel are the top 3 things to achieve, triple the amount of renewable energy, doubling the energy efficiency, and phasing out fossil fuels. I would start with saying that, number 1, for India, renewable energy today is it's the only energy that makes sense for industries. And let me break down the problem for you. In India, approximately 55% of the energy, overall energy, is consumed by commercial and industrial customers who are also paying anywhere from 8 rupees per unit to maybe 12, 13 rupees per unit, depending on where you are and who you are. Renewable energy, whether you're buying it from solar, from wind, whether you're buying it from within your state, you're buying it over the interstate network, is going to land to you at not more than 5 rupees per unit, maybe 6 rupees per unit, right? But not beyond that in most states. So there's a clear economic benefit. A lot of finance has been mobilized. You heard Shashank, we ourselves have raised $400 million, right? And I think billions of dollars have already been mobilized in equity capital. Debt markets are not far behind. Debt is, chasing that equity now at this point. And, just the fact that companies like Welspun are now going out and chasing hydrogen, which is like a 50 to 100 times bigger investment as compared to a solar power plant, means that, we've got the capital, we've got the intent, we've got the capability, that energy is cheaper. It's simply a matter of when people take that decision. Folks like Nxtra, I know I've dealt with Sindhu in the past that, there are certain companies who are leaders in this regard, and they've gone out, they've taken those decisions, and they are reaping the benefits. So number 1, I would say that renewable energy adoption for industries, which is more than half the problem, and also for consumers, needs to become easier. The primary constraint in that is regulatory and policy-related complications, because power being a concurrent matter, you have certain direction and policies at the center level, but each state has to come out and kind of endorse that in its own way. And you see a lot of, movement there, and that is why, just for, people who are not from the power industry in this room, only 6 or 7 states today in India out of the 26 states have good policies for buying renewable energy. Whereas all the 26 states can benefit from that. If they move in that direction, so that would be number one. On energy efficiency, I really feel that I've done some studies with companies like the Bureau of Energy Efficiency who've done some landmark work in the field of energy efficiency. In fact, the PAT scheme, which I believe that a lot of people in this room would be aware of, the PAT scheme alone, in a 4-year period from 2014 to 2019, was able to get 53 or 59 companies together to offset around 150 million tons of carbon dioxide just by adding efficiency, right? Which was done by small measures, lighting, controllable HVACs and so on. So the potential for energy efficiency to be a central player in reducing the carbon footprint and putting the, it's a virtuous cycle that Shashank was also talking about, that, once we really can figure out how to play that energy efficiency game at a larger scale, even the SMEs can start benefiting from that. I feel that it's going to be very, very powerful, right? And it's basically going to cut your targets in half, right? So that's definitely something which I believe needs to happen. More companies like BEE need to be incorporated. They need to be funded. They need to be founded. And companies like BEE needs to be empowered. And then lastly, on the phasing out of fossil fuels, I feel that is the most daunting challenge. Because, while we say that 50% of installed power is going to come from renewable energy, that only translates into around 10-15% of overall energy. So while you'll have 50% of installed capacity in terms of energy, electricity, you'll only have maybe 15-16% from renewable energy. So by 2030, even if we meet the 50% target, we are actually 85% reliant on coal. And the same agency, the International Energy Agency, basically predicts that even in 2070, India is going to be powering at least 40% of its energy from coal. That's 45 years out from today. So while those agencies can predict what they want to, I truly believe that energy storage is on the brink, it's on the cusp of becoming economically viable in the Indian context, right? It's already, I think billions of dollars have been mobilized in energy storage in the US, in Australia, in Europe, right? But India is some unique challenges that we are trying to negotiate, and we are going to get through them. And I was just telling you that fun fact, right? So for people, non-power people in this room, what fascinates me most about the power industry is when you actually go out and flick on a bulb in a room, that power is actually generated at that moment. There is no storage on the grid. So when all of this power is being generated real time. So there are agencies who are, working day and night to predict how much power would be used, and then working backwards, making sure that that power can be generated and scheduled at that point of time. The moment energy storage becomes a player in this ecosystem, our lives are going to transform, the way, for example, the only way we know storage as a civilization today is on our handsets. So when we moved from computer screens to having a device in our pocket, the kind of change that we had then, I believe that energy storage can affect a change like that, and it's the only true vehicle through which we can actually phase out fossil fuels. And then by that time, I'm hoping that hydrogen also comes of age. And that is the trifecta, I believe: renewable energy friendly policy, energy storage innovation, along with energy efficiency, and then becoming a leader in hydrogen technology. That will put us on that path. Thank you.
Very well and succinctly put, Kartikeya. I hope everything that you've said comes true at the earliest, if I may say. Yeah. So we barely have about 5 minutes left. So can we all pick up our mics and do a little rapid fire question and just in one sentence, if we can kind of attack the issue at hand. I mean, we've talked about the potential, we've talked about the opportunity set in the renewable sector space, and both from a producer and a buyer perspective. What do you think could be the key risk that could derail this whole movement towards renewable sector? And if you can answer that in one sentence quite quickly.
Yeah, so I will pick three. The right-of-way issues, evacuation infrastructure, and supply chain ecosystem.
So, if you'll see in last 4 years, 5 years, we have favorable policies in place, right? We need these policies for next 10 years, 15 years, if we really want that pie to grow. So uncertainty will create an issue.
Yeah, I would concur with Sindhu. It's the regulatory environment which is the biggest risk through this transition.
Bimal, do you want to kind of elaborate on your 3 points, because they went right zip over
So
my head at least.
Yeah, so I will start with the evacuation infrastructure. You know, we are talking about a 300 gigawatt target by 2030, and if we need to do roughly, we are like 7 years. So we are talking about 20-25 gigawatts sort of installations every year. If the evacuation infrastructure is not available to evacuate that kind of power, leave the production, you cannot do it. While CA is working rigorously on this, I think we need to expedite if we want to hit that target. Today, most of the developers are struggling to get the CTU connectivity at the timeline which they want to commission the plants. The second challenge is right-of-way issues for acquiring the land, whether it's a solar wind project or the transmission lines, So that also is pretty big challenge, which is delaying the project. The project which you can do technically or practically in, let's say, 6 to 8 months or 10 months, it takes 2 years and sometimes 3 years, and sometimes you get stuck because of the few patches and the project get derailed also, right? And the third portion, when I say supply chain ecosystem, I'm not talking about modules or inverters. Everyone is focusing on that. Let's talk about the downstream when we talk about the transformers, combiner box, structures, everything, right? If you need to do that, you need to have the strong supply chain ecosystem within the country where the credible suppliers can deliver you 25, 30. If you want 25 gigawatts, your capacity should be 40 gigawatt. Because of the various reasons, the efficiencies, breakdowns, strikes, or whatever, we don't have. The people are struggling. It's like, the guy who can pay more, who has more good relationship, or who can control, they are able to manage. But if you look historically, all the projects are not happening on time. So these are the rationales for.
No, thank you for the explanation, Bimal. So one last one. I hope we can just kind of fit it in the time left. What is the one advice you would give to companies who have the ambition of carbon neutrality in energy usage? So the one advice in one sentence for the audience here who's probably part of corporations and entities where they have that carbon neutrality ambition, or still on paper probably. Now, how do they kind of achieve it?
So, the carbon neutrality, can be achieved by, again, taking the countermeasures as well as conserving the power consumption also. I think I will say the green buildings concept, I'm seeing even this, LEED certified buildings. But if you look, in India, we don't have many of those buildings. If we focus on that, if we reduce our power consumption during the day, even I was talking to you, the AC here is, pretty cold. Even, every single degree, I think, Kartikeya, you also said, every single degree, if you go from 22 to 23 to 24, you save the power substantially. And we are not talking 1, 2, 3%. It can go 20%, 30%, 40%. Instead of 22 degree, if I maintain my car temperature, or let's say my room temperature at 25 degree or 24 degree, which is also good. Many people say, no, I want to have this thing. You're saving tons of power. You need not to produce that much, So if we bring that concept, that itself will, reduce the power consumption demand while, we're working on other part. Yeah.
So basically you're saying that people need to be more aware the way they are consuming the energy. There has to be a changed mindset.
I'm
as
sorry,
well.
I'm taking one more minute. I was talking to one of the gentlemen who was the chief sustainability officer with one of the very big, multinational corporate. And he was talking to the founder, chairman, and very reputed person not in the country, outside. He said, we are debating the traditional HVAC guy said, I need to put that way. And he was going back to the history of India. If you look into our historical buildings, we don't have any air conditioning. We used to have water bodies. We designed based on the airflow on the season. And he said, let me do something different in the structure. He gave me very, innovative concept. We are talking at the midnight, sitting on something different. And he was telling me that, he put a water channel on the roof. And that helped him to reduce the power consumption by more than 20%. Now, and it's practically done in one of the very big company and they're trying to implement. But sometimes you need to become unconventional. You cannot go with the same ways to, hit the same targets. Yeah.
Very well said. Thank you. Sindhu, do you have a word of advice for companies?
So we need to have a proper plan in place. It's not just about RE. So RE is a part of supply side. We need to have the demand side in place, right amount of initiatives for energy efficiency, so that at least we'll cut down your emissions. Small initiatives which are for that you need very less amount of time and investment. You need to first target those. Then you should also work on the new technologies. Let's talk about us. We are the first data center company having fuel cell system deployed at one of our data center. And that fuel cell technology is also hydrogen ready. Tomorrow, guys like you and you will make this economical, we'll definitely adopt those, hydrogen also. So,
thank you, Sindhu.
Yeah.
We only have time for that much. Kartikeya, your last one piece of advice.
My advice to large consumers of power in this room would be to go after your net zero goals, because really go after them, because in this decade, that might be the most important goal that you're going to nail down. So really
Very well said. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you for being such a patient audience.